Hey, greetings, everybody. My name is Zach Sarkis. I am the chair of the Education Committee for the NYCGPA. Today, we're lucky to have Alan Gandelman, the president of the NYCGPA, and Eric Carbone, co-chair of the Education Committee. And we're going to be talking about this preliminary THC cultivation license for qualified hemp cultivators. We're speaking as licensed CBD cultivators, and we're having this conversation here given our experience. The idea is to create a high-level kind of overview of what we're looking at as fellow cultivators and industry operators and educators, and then know that we'll have some follow-up conversations down the road in the coming weeks. So, Alan, Eric, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, great. So one of the big things I want to start with is the valuation of biomass of our harvest of our crop. We're hearing a lot of different stuff, and we want to be on the cautious side, but what are we looking at? If someone comes out and tells you a price, what are we looking at for the valuation of biomass this year, or how are we valuing it?
Great. Yeah, it's a great question, Zach. The issue is the prices are going to be all over the map. I don't even want to talk about pricing today because it's super, super uncertain. At the end of the day, the pricing, in my opinion, will be determined by the amount of dispensaries that are open this year and what the demand is. That's just the way commodities markets work. And because we're not super clear on when those dispensaries open, or if they're all opening at once, or if they're going to be staged out, we really just do not know the pricing. I would recommend that people go look at, there's a lot of benchmarking service. Cannabis Benchmarks is one of them. Go take some time and do some research about, states like Massachusetts, Illinois, Michigan, what was their biomass pricing when they first opened their market? How many doors were there? And start to do your own due diligence and kind of predictions until we can get those services operating in New York State and really benchmarking the true market, value.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, Eric, we were talking about earlier, like the different kinds of biomass or even flower products. Like, what are we looking at this year when we're doing our research?
So there's quite a few different ways we can, deliver our biomass, right? When we're speaking to biomass, that's going to be materials that are going to be going to the existing processors that qualify for the conditional licensing. So, it could be a good way to have those conversations if you are connected with some of these processors. If not, I'm sure people that are, but there's going to be various forms of biomass that people are going to be looking for. We have the traditional, which we're used to in the hemp industry, which is just kind of your bucked biomass. Whether you sift it for fan leaves or not, it's up to you, but that is going to be a viable crop that these extractors and processors will be looking for. Fresh frozen, as we know, especially looking into other recreational markets, is going to be, I think, one of the biggest, especially on the onset of this industry. Fresh frozen, you cut it out fresh, freezer trucks, you throw it into freezer trucks. It's going to be going directly to the extractor, or they're going to have it in storage. So long-term storage becomes a viable option with fresh frozen, which I think is going to play a big part, especially this first year. And then, as cultivators under the conditional, we are allowed to process our flower products. Now, one of the byproducts of that, trimming, right? Most of the flower products on the market are going to be trimmed. One of the byproducts of that is trim, swag, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of terms for it in the industry. That is still a viable product that could get a pretty good payout for. And knowing that it's not waste, it's still going to be, it's still going to have your THC content. Obviously, it's going to be determined off of the starter material it comes from. But, I think the market is also going to be determined very much on percentage points that we similarly saw in the hemp industry. As hemp farmers, most of us, it's not uncommon to have, 15, 18, 20% CBD biomass. So I think that would be a good kind of benchmark for farmers to kind of shoot for average material on the, extraction material side. But have those conversations, reach out to fellow cultivators, reach out to other people in the industry that it's important to have those connections to understand what types of biomass these people want.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And what I'm taking from this is that there's definitely a bunch of value add opportunities. Be careful if anyone's telling you what they know the price is today without a contract and without, again, kind of consensus. Like, just be really cautious. This is the time to be doing our research. It's definitely time to begin trying to find contracts. It's not a question. Ideally, we have plants in the ground that got a destination to go, but being smart about that and knowing that this is a seller's market. We cannot satiate the New York State market, even if we all grew as much as we could. And so that's a reality that we have to be just aware and carry in our back pocket as cultivators. This year is definitely going to be farmer facing when it comes to the value of our product, and let's make sure we're in conversation with that, so no one's getting left out. One of the big things, if we're talking about THC percentage, of course, then the next part of the conversation is genetics. So what have we learned from CBD? The world of CBD when it comes to genetics, and what are we concerned about thinking about as we're moving forward?
Yeah, I'll start that one off. We've been growing hemp here at our farm for 4 years, and we have grown probably every single hemp CBD genetic that we could find on the marketplace over those 4 years. And we've spent multiple of those years doing research with Cornell and actually testing the DNA of those genetics, testing who their parent plants are, disease resistance, pest resistance. We've done a lot of research over the years. And I can tell you, most of the genetics we have grown here have been missed. They have not been good. The seeds weren't feminized. The germ rates were low. They actually weren't hemp, and they would start containing 5% or more of THC. And so in the hemp world, obviously that was unacceptable. I think we're going to face very similar problems in the genetics world on the THC side. There's not that many out there that are regionally adapted for the state of New York. We all experienced last year's really wet summer. You're going to have a lot of powdery mildew. You're going to have a lot of botrytis. And so the only way to really deal with those is to have reliable genetic sources. And so there's a lot of people coming in from out of state right now offering tons of clones, which I won't talk about right now. Maybe Eric can talk about that, but seeds, all sorts of crazy price points. People are trying to charge insane amounts of money for seeds, insane amounts of money for clones, none of which have ever really been tested here. And so that's, the part for me as a longtime farmer, makes me really nervous is the unreliability of seeds. One of the reasons we got those 20 grow lights into this conditional law, because originally it was 0, was specifically so that farmers could have a place to do their own breeding and their own genetics trials. And that is going to be super important for the first year. I mean, a lot of us are going to have varieties that just simply suck. And we're going to have to, some of us will do breeding, some of us will rely on our fellow farmers to do the breeding. But that is definitely, something to be very cautious and wary of.
So on that, again, you kind of made mention of clones, and feel free to bring some of your experience beyond clones and seeds. Eric, what are your thoughts on clones right now?
So clones can be touchy. We know that there were a lot of hemp farmers that would, kind of do their transplants from clones that were propagated in an indoor environment and drop those clones outside. Clones, if done right, can work, but the reality of it is that if they're, in an indoor grow, they're not going to be used to the 10, 15, potentially 20 mile an hour winds that we could get, depending on where you are in the city, in the state rather. My farm is in a valley. We have a ton of wind. It's windy just about every day. And, I know of some farmers that put clones right into the ground, put them in, beautiful day. The next day they come out, a little bit of wind all night, and then everything is just pinched over because they were not stable enough. The stems were not stable enough to withstand those winds, which leads to one of my biggest fear for clones and the genetics that we've been talking about is that, not every strain is developed for outdoor growing. We're going to be growing outdoors. So we have to make sure that the genetics that we're lining up or the genetics that we have access to are stable in outdoor environments. Bringing an indoor strain that's really not designed to see the light of day and putting that outdoors, okay, it may grow, but it's not going to grow proper. So you know, genetics is going to be one of the most important aspects of us under this conditional program to make sure that we have a viable crop to bring to at the end of the day. And, you know, clones, you know, even if they're great, they're designed for the outdoor environments. Are they being kept in a super clean environment? There is a lot of disease that can come with clones, depending on, you know, I mean, there's a million variables. I can sit here and talk about it all day, but.
Yeah. So we'll just touch on the biggest problem they're having in California. And this is why, you know, be careful where you get your clones from. The hop latent viroid is a huge issue in California. You know, at my farm, we actually have tests, so we could test for hop latent viroid and any, you know, genetics that we have or people are sending us, because it can come in on seeds too. That's a very low percentage. We'll do more workshops on those. We have some people coming to talk about that, but I'm sure some of you are already, you know, stacking clones up or stacking mothers up. And if they have HLV, you're going to have a serious issue out in the field. I mean, there could be massive crop loss because of that. So, you know, that is something people should be paying attention to. You know, the other part about clones is that our conditional license has this unique greenhouse category. In greenhouses, the way this law is written, could be anything from hoops up to like nicer glass greenhouse structures that could be heated but have no grow lights. So like that is a wide range of environments. And so depending on your seeds and your clones, they might do well if you have a big glass house and you're heating it. It's very different to just like regular hoops out in the field. You know, so you're really going to have to take into consideration your growing requirements, your growing conditions, and what those different genetics can or cannot handle.
Yeah, these are all so huge. And the reality is like what we're looking for is something that's stable, something that is generally disease resistant. And again, like that's going to it's going to finish, because we know anything that finishes will be sold this year. And so it's like being mindful of, you know, as this market matures, we're going to need less variety. You know, maybe this year it's not so bad if there's 3 or 4 or 5 phenotypes in a particular seed lot, but eventually as the market matures, we're going to need to have a lot more consistency and quality control to make sure we're hitting our target markets. So I think those are all big things.
Yes. And then Zach, which, you know, we don't have time today, but this is another whole workshop, is that you're talking about finishing and extracts. Extracts require certain trichomes to make the best quality extracts. It's all about timing. And so if you don't know your genetics and when to pull them, you're not going to be having the best biomass for extracts, and your price is going to be lower than someone who pulled them at the right day, right? Especially for frozen. So you're going to have your auto flowers. You're going to have your, what we call here, quicks, that are more like the CBD genetics we're all used to growing, that are like, you know, those, they're harvesting September, October, they're okay. And then you're going to have your full terms, some of your landrace stuff that are like 12 weeks. They're probably not going to finish outdoor. And if you got clones on some of these 12-week varietals and you put them out in the field and you don't have any sort of way to light depth them, you know, you're not going to finish, and your biomass is going to be worth a lot less money because it will not be ready, and the THC percentage will be a lot lower. And so, you know, it goes back to our original biomass point. There is the market is very sophisticated, unlike it was with hemp early on. There is a huge difference that extractors are going to want to see, and how much they're going to pay for different material. And so that is going to all be impacted by those genetics.
Great. Love that. I mean, so then we're beginning to look at, like, you know, as we're talking about genetics, that's kind of like the tip of the iceberg for risks. And so looking at general business risks, you know, we're talking contracts, we're talking about guarantees later, you know, genetic security, these things. Like, what do we want to talk about? And, you know, just especially if we're talking about general business risk, make sure you consult your lawyers, folks. We are not your legal team, but we're here to provide reference, and you can learn by our struggle. So yeah, what are we looking at, like, let's say with contracts and stuff?
So I can tell you one thing that I experienced very early on in the CBD world. You know, we had license number 23, I think, in hemp and CBD in New York here at the farm. And so I was getting hit up every day, all the time, with crazy offers. And a lot of the way these offers looked was like, all right, you grow for us. You're going to sign this contract where you're going to sell us all your material at the end of the day. But we're not going to put any cash down up front for you. So you're funding the whole thing yourself. We're only going to pay you this much money. And on the back end, here's what the price is going to be. And like, at first I was like, oh, this is all great. This is looking fantastic. But I personally soon realized, like, I'm assuming all of the risk, and there's nothing in these contracts that force the buy. It's basically an option where they win, because if the price is good, they have an option to buy my stuff for reduced rate because I thought I had locked in a buyer. But there's no cash up front, and these contracts are so loosely written that they could literally walk away and disappear. And I'm stuck with my crop that I wasn't pre-selling to somebody else because I thought I had this contract, and I'm left at the end of the season like, shit, what am I going to do? And now if I need that money back because I took out a loan or line of credit to grow that crop and pay for labor, pay for genetics, what am I going to do? I'm going to turn around and dump my stuff on the market for as cheap as possible to get my money back as fast as possible to pay my debts. And that's how I watched some of the other hemp farmers get into a really bad position because they thought they had a sale, but they got no money up front. The contract wasn't well written and didn't go to their lawyer. And so basically some random group from out of state just had an option to buy their stuff or walk away from them. And that is really, and there's not enough established companies in the industry right now to hold accountable. And so you really want to be careful on those contracts. If you can get one of those contracts and it's super solid and your lawyer agrees and you've done all this due diligence, yeah, great, good for you. But just be very careful of these kind of fast, I'll call them fast and loose business deals.
And to that, I experienced something on the back end our first year in 2018. Much like Alan, I was one of the first licensed hemp farmers in the state and had a lot of those early conversations, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall, like Alan mentioned, and I kind of shied away from them. But late in the season, I had somebody come to me with an offer that sounded too good to be true. And it was worth a little more than some of the conversations I had previously, and went through the whole contract and lawyers looking at it on both ends. And it turns out that, there was promissory notes and everything like that. He ended up walking away with 3,000 pounds of my material that I never saw payment for. I ended up finding my material, but that's a whole other story. But the reality of it is that you have a tight group of people in the state that know a lot of the players in this industry. If somebody does come to you with one of these, just call a friend. Have you ever heard of so-and-so? Have you heard of this organization? It's not the best practice of vetting, but at least if there's some sort of connection to somebody else that is a good player, a good person, it might be an okay deal, but ask around. That's the best thing I could say is ask around.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate all those perspectives. And, it's interesting because it's not explicit who we can and cannot sell to particular. Like, it's evident that us as cultivators can sell to the processors, but what about brokers? What about, who is going to be able to make offers here? That's a big question. And yeah, I think the community vetting process is definitely a good start. And then making sure legal teams looking in. And as we said, like, this is a seller's market, folks. Get your cash up front. let's have our seeds paid for before they go on the ground. But really anything we can do to see that, because every processor I'm aware of is going to need a lot of volume. And the reality is it's like 1 acre is so much if we're talking about flower tops. But from a biomass perspective, it's quite limited, especially when we're looking at the capacity and overall demand for New York State. So a lot of things to consider. We're here, like we said, our next steps are beginning to have grower roundtable discussions. So this is part 1. We're going to go into depth with everything we just covered and more within the next 2 weeks. So stay tuned. We'll send out an email registration link through the NYCGPA contact. And yeah, like that's kind of that's the next step of making sure that there is open conversation between cultivators. So we're vetting, investing, in the way that best serves our organizations. Cool. Well, Alan, Eric, guys, thank you so much for your perspective. Years of trial and tribulation just came through in this snippet, and yeah, hopefully this is a good start and supportive for folks who are ready to get in this next step in the industry.
Well, thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Alan.